All right, folks, welcome to our weekly Facebook Live update. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into some of our numbers and some of our COVID updates and then a few other questions we've gotten in. So our total case count in Norwood is up to 604. So it's 604, and that includes both probable and confirmed. And largely what we're seeing is a growth in the number of probable cases. What a probable case is a doctor designation or doctor determination or diagnosis is the correct word of a case, whereas the confirmed is where they actually had the test or the nasal swab to determine whether or not they had tested positive. Our community testing program is at about just a little under 50 folks having taken advantage of that so far. Luckily, everyone that has tested in the community testing program has been negative, so that's a good sign. I have both good and bad news about our weekly case count, and I'm going to show them on a chart right here. And there we are. So the bad news is our weekly case count actually doubled from last week. The good news is it went from 1 to 2. So the numbers are still very, very low overall. To put that in the context, our worst week, the week of April 5th, we had 107 cases that week. I was actually able to call Stacy Lane, our public health nurse, today, and she was able to pick up the phone right away, which is a rarity because there were some days there that you weren't getting a call back for an hour or two because there were so many cases that we were doing the contact tracing on. So we were able to, we've gone from having as many as 100 cases in a week down to 1 or 2. Now we think that number is a little artificially low and sometimes the data is a little bit delayed, but that's actually a very positive number. And you're seeing that same trend in Massachusetts. I pulled up the state's numbers from yesterday, and it's interesting. Yesterday, the state had 172 cases for the day across the entire Commonwealth. We had about 107 in 1 week. So when you look at the Commonwealth of 7 million people versus what we have here in Norwood, not only are we seeing the same numbers trend out, but we're seeing that our numbers are continuing that downward trend. We started off with about 6 cases when we got started, went up to about 18, then it went up to somewhere in the 50s, dropped to about 27, then it was 61, 107, 94, then it came down at 47, and it hovered in the high 40s to the high 30s for about a month, and then right around mid-May, we saw quite a good drop-off, and we've been under 10 cases per week for since about the last week of May, which is a good thing. So our numbers are trending in the right direction. The state's numbers are trending in the right direction. The overall level of testing in the Commonwealth has skyrocketed. We're up to over 1 million tests. If everyone remembers, just maybe 2 months ago, it was hard to get a test even if you were legitimately suspected of having COVID or had legitimate concerns. So I think that's proof that we've generally done things right in Massachusetts, that our numbers here in Norwood are panning out that people are doing things right, and we want to continue to do that. We are concerned about growing case numbers in Florida and Texas and California and other states. I know that the tri-state area in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut have issued travel restrictions or travel or quarantine requirements for folks coming from states with high case counts. We don't know if the governor would do that in Massachusetts. We certainly can't do that at the local level here in Massachusetts, but that's sort of where our topic of discussion has shifted in our daily command briefings. Is we're concerned that if it's happening in other states and those folks travel, what happens when they come here? You are technically still supposed to self-quarantine for 2 weeks when you come to Massachusetts from another state, unless you live in a bordering state. And to be honest with you, if you're in Massachusetts and you travel to another state, unless it's for work, you are supposed to self-quarantine for 2 weeks when you come back. So that's a bit challenging. I don't know what level of compliance there is on that. People are starting to schedule vacations out over the 4th of July and into August. I know I'm tentatively trying to go out of state for vacation in August. We'll see if that's able to happen and what the quarantine requirements then are. We just wish the rest of the country was seeing the same numbers we were seeing. We don't think that this is necessarily a second wave, as people call it, because we're not really through the first wave. What it may have been, and it's still too early to tell because testing is becoming much wider in other parts of the country. And remember, the testing is not necessarily, that's an important number, but you'd really have to dig into the hospitalization rates and see where those rates are, because the positive tests could be somebody who's otherwise healthy, that there's just viral remains in their system. So we're not really sure. We don't have necessarily the resources to dig into these other states' numbers, other than we're concerned that their numbers seem to be swelling quite a bit. Most other countries have seen sort of a continued downward trend, and in Massachusetts, we're seeing that continued downward trend. The United States as a whole saw that upward trend down, and then now it's picking back up. That being said, California is such a big state, at I think over 50 million people. The numbers in California going up, if they're, sort of raw numbers as a percentage or their population, there's 54 million people in California. So there's 7 or 8 times the number of people in California, or 9 times, I believe, than there is in Massachusetts. But that's a concern as our numbers continue to go very well, or do very well. We want to continue that. So a couple of things specific on our numbers. Interestingly enough, we pulled some data. More than 20% of our cases, or about 25% of our cases, are over the age of 80. The number of deaths in town is really tough to calculate. As I've said before, that all comes from the state, and some of those numbers are tough to correlate whether you really consider it somebody passed away in Norwood, because the state has to sort out whether they just happen to be at the hospital here. There's almost no sort of community passing from COVID in Norwood. A majority have been at nursing facilities. And there again, that may count as a Norwood fatality because the person's considered living in Norwood, but they may have been in nursing care or may have been living in Braintree and just transferred to Norwood, and therefore counts in that number. But the community spread is still low. We're still only seeing the handful of cases that we get are largely essential workers. We know that the state tested about 17,000 people who participated in protests in Boston a few weeks ago and other cities, and the testing positive rate there was around 2.5%, which is a good number overall. Again, without perfect information, and you never have perfect data, you can't draw all the conclusions, but that would seem to believe that the actual prevalence of the virus in the populace now and among people is very low. And again, some of those positive cases could have simply been folks who still had the virus in their system and were still testing positive. So we're happy that the numbers continue to trend in that direction. We would just now be seeing some of the data from opening outdoor dining. It takes about 2 weeks for numbers to really show, and even then some. So Memorial Day weekend, we're well past 2 weeks from that. So what we can reasonably assume is that there was no spread around Memorial Day weekend. Well, the next big sort of opening of society or opening of the economy was around June 8th, when restaurants were able to open up for outdoor dining, and restaurants and retail was able to open with some restrictions. Thank you for joining us, Katie, and thank you for joining us, Lisa. So what we've seen is interesting. We're just shy of 2 weeks post that. But in another week or so will be when we can get really good data, because really, if somebody was exposed, the day outdoor dining opened and the day retail shopping opened, we would just be seeing it from day one. But our initial numbers are very encouraging. As everyone knows, we're a little bit ahead of the curve here with outdoor dining. We were able to get it up and running the day it was able to. Some communities are still fumbling to make that happen. On a day-by-day basis, if you look at the cases we've seen, the relatively few we've seen in the last 5 days or since June 8th, we're not seeing that big of an increase. So that's a good thing. Now, that means that people are being safe. That means that, as predicted, things like outdoor dining and socially distanced retail shopping are safe when they're done correct. What we hope it really means is that people are not going out when they're sick. People are wearing their masks, which is helpful when you're in public, and we're going to talk about masks in a minute. And that the overall rate of the virus has died enough that it's not very prevalent in society and not very prevalent among the population. We do need people to continue to practice their good social distancing. As everyone knows, this Monday, indoor dining opened in the Commonwealth, and I've gone to one indoor dining establishment. I still prefer the outdoor dining. We've set up weekends on Central, which we want folks to partake in as a great way to eat outdoors. Remember, the contact or the risk of spread through surface contact is fairly minimal. We do want people to make sure they're cleaning high-touch surfaces. If you're keeping your hands clean, you're keeping yourself clean, it really is a person-to-person contact, and it really is extended contact. And the way we know that is even from our own data. When we were sort of in full shutdown mode, the number of community transmissions we saw, so that was folks who we couldn't trace where they got COVID from, was almost non-existent. So the grocery stores, people who were just going into the grocery stores were not catching COVID in the grocery stores. We did see some employees getting it, because that's a different experience. You go into the grocery store, you do your shopping, you're sort of in and out in maybe half an hour or 45 minutes, longer, I'm sure, if you have kids or a complicated shopping list. And you're not in one place for that entire time, and you're not regularly interacting with one person. Even during the full shutdown, you may have stopped and asked a clerk from a socially distant position, But even then, it was maybe you asked a question. The clerks were behind plexiglass masks, so we know that the social distancing and the social distancing works and that security measures work. We're really still not seeing that community spread, so that's a good thing. I want to talk about masks for a minute, and then Kathleen, I'll get to your question in just a second. So I'm wearing a different kind of mask. This is, I'm not sure what you would call it, but there's a company called Mission that makes these. They're designed to sort of stay around your neck, and then you can pop it up like that. I find these to be very flexible because I'm sort of in and out of the office, and I'm in and out of a lot of places, and putting on sort of the traditional mask for a long period of time might be easier, but always putting it on and taking it off, putting on, taking it off, and I'm always losing the masks. So this, I happen to be walking down the hallway, or I see somebody, it's very quick to just go like this. If you're like me, you also have the option of full cognito mode or full incognito mode. And there's other benefits that these ones have. I guess you can wet them and cool them. I just use it because it's convenient to know I always have my mask with me. I know one of the frustrations folks have is putting a mask on as they're getting seated at the restaurant. But it's important to remember that's as much for your protection as it is for everyone else at that restaurant, for those employees at that restaurant, and that restaurant's business. If somebody ends up testing positive at a restaurant and they have to call a bunch of clients and let them know, it could kill that restaurant's business. So as frustrated as you may be, and I feel the same frustration, I parked the car, and God, it's taken me years to try to correct my Boston eloquence there. And you know that you see that there's nobody at the hostess stand and there's a table right there that you're going to get sat at, and the inclination is to want to just go and say, I'm right here, I'm just going to go sit at these gator masks is what these are called. I want to just go sit at that table. But the best practice, what you need to do is still just throw your mask on, even if it's for just a minute or two. I know it's frustrating, but just pop the mask on above the nose, go in. Once you're sitting, you can take the mask off, and unless you're getting up to go to the bathroom, you can keep the mask off while you're eating. I went somewhere downtown a few weeks ago, and as you're walking along to go in, you literally do just walk in and you put your mask on for all of 2 steps, and they say, would you urge you like to sit? You sit right there, and you sit right there, and you take it off. I know, but it's challenging, but we need to do it, and it's important that we continue to do it and wear our masks where you can. The social distancing is important when you can practice it. We know it all can't happen all at once, but the more we continue to do it, the more we can enjoy things like the outdoor dining, and the more we don't ever have to go back to shut back. So I know it's frustrating. We had a call with restaurants this week, and somebody reported that a customer walked in and did not want to wear a mask, and they asked the person to leave. And that's unfortunate, but it's for everyone's safety and protection, and it's for the safety and protection of that business and their ability to feed themselves. Businesses have been put through a lot. We don't want to put them through anymore. Question from Kathleen, can the rec department do fitness classes like yoga on Central? The short answer is yes. We are looking at specifically whether we can do sunrise yoga on Central. As Central Street is designed, really, it's now, by the way, summer on Central, not just weekends on Central. The Board of Selectmen have decided to continue it through July. We're going to look at some alternate programming down there where it won't interrupt people who are using it for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or their outings. But we think certainly the morning yoga is a great example of what we can do on weekends on Central, and we'll probably be having that up and running soon. We do have other park space that we would do some outdoor fitness in. We've got to be careful. The outdoor fitness that's allowed has to be no contact. As we know, yoga is no contact, so it's a perfect example for that, or perfect use for that. So we'll be working on that particular programming, getting some yoga on Central in the early mornings, which I think will be great. We are bringing Wi-Fi to summer on Central. Probably a couple more weeks, broadband will have that up and running in full. We have signed the purchase orders for the sound system on the Common, which is something we've been working on for a long time anyway, and that should be up and running hopefully in the next month or so as well. I'll jump to Deborah's question real quick. Appreciate the grace period for May 1st tax bills. Any anticipated grace period for August 1st quarterly tax bill? And of course, these weekly updates are informative, helpful, and appreciated. Thank you, Deborah, and thank you for all you do for the community as well. We delayed the payment for May 1st tax bills. We only did that because state law allowed us to do that. We otherwise don't have the authority at the local level to make that determination. Now, I don't know if the state has yet decided or thought about whether or not they would extend it. If the state were to allow us to extend that August 1st date, I think we would go ahead and want to do that for the first quarterly tax bill. As of right now, they have not. We did send out a robocall yesterday reminding everyone, if you chose to delay your fourth quarter tax bill, so that's only if you chose to delay it. If you've already been paying your taxes or they're paid through your escrow company, doesn't really relate to you. But if you chose to delay it, those tax bills are due by June 29th, close of business. So Monday, June 29th. Again, it's a statutory or a state law requirement. We don't have much control over that. We just don't want anyone to come in on the 30th and pay it. I do believe in the past we've said the 30th because that's the end of the fiscal year. The legislature, in their infinite wisdom, has decided that June 29th would be a better date than June 30th. Don't know why they did. But no information yet on whether first quarter tax bills could be delayed. We would certainly look into that if the state were to allow us to do that. But that's it's a great question. The outdoor dining is great. We think that outdoor dining has been really, really good. It's been good for some of the businesses. We were really ahead of the curve in getting it done. The outdoor seating on Central Street has been helpful to some of the businesses that either don't have enough space for outdoor dining or are really takeout places as well. So we're happy with it. We want to find ways to continue it every year and make sure that we kind of make Norwood pop in the summertime. Question from Julie, do you know what percentage of school classrooms are large enough to fit a full class of kids at 3 apart? Off the top of my head, I don't know. The state, what Julie is referring to is the state has released their guidelines for education in the fall. And what they've asked school districts to prepare for is sort of 3 options. One is you're in school, one is sort of a hybrid, and then the other is full remote learning depending on where we are. So the desk guideline is that there needs to be 3 feet in between desks. My guess is most classrooms can probably accommodate that now the elementary schools are a little bit smaller, but they're going to have to look at the furniture in the classroom, and it's really for the superintendent and his team to come up with a specific plan. They should be able to get fairly close to it if you look at rearranging furniture in the classroom and what we're using for learning devices. Some of the elementary schools may have a challenge with it, but if you're keeping your classroom size reasonable, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. The bigger challenge is it's not as simple as just say, we'll add a classroom. We don't physically have the space. Most districts don't physically have the space. Now, I haven't dug into the school regulations yet, but there might be something in there about dividers. I don't know how you would do that, but the restaurant regulations, as an example, are there's no 6-foot or 3-foot requirement. They're just, you have to be 6 feet or provide a non-porous barrier. So there might be options to provide non-porous barriers. I have no idea how that would work in a classroom, and that's sort of well beyond, but that might be an option as well. Suffice to say, we will find out some solution to make sure kids are back in school as much as possible in the fall. We got a question about the robocalls and the number to sign up for them. That's a good question. I believe that's on the town's website. If not, you can always email into managers@norwoodma.gov the number, and we'll make sure it gets on there. I'll have to double check which database that gets pulled from. We do have the ability to do segmented calls if we had certain lists of numbers, but if you just get us that information, we'll make sure it's on there, and we will be able to get that information to you, and we'll actually get that posted on the website too to make sure everyone's signed up for the reverse 911s that we're able to do. And as Sarah commented, the guidance suggests working with cities and towns to identify additional spaces that may work as classrooms. There's a lot of options like that. You may, phys ed is going to be tough. You may have a gym. You may have flexible classroom space. It just may take some reimagining of the spaces that we have. And if you use Central Street as an example of that, not that I think we would start having classrooms out on the street, but I guess it's possible. We took a street and now we've created an outdoor dining area. So I think as schools get creative, that might be an option for doing that. We don't have too high of a classroom size in most of the elementary schools because we're limited by the space, but it may take some reimagining of that space. You're right. Could they look at other schools and other buildings? That's always a possibility as well as some of the shared spaces, cafeteria spaces. My understanding of the regulations as they are now, and no idea how it's going to work specifically, are lunches to be served in the classroom. I guess if that works, that's a work, but you could see some classes are sort of permanently in a cafeteria or a gym until we can reach that full space. That's an option. I agree, Courtney. Barriers in a classroom would probably be too difficult. The only place I could see that and create some learning issues, the only way I could see that working is if there was, probably on a limited basis, if it was you could fit X number of people if you just did it with one area. If you think of sort of like when you go past first class on a plane and they have the little cabin things, that might end up ultimately take more effort, but that might be an option for certain things. If there's some reason where you needed to have a lot of kids in one space, if there's only 3 feet in between a desk, I don't know how the distancing could work, but it may come into play with the way you set up a row or something like that. It still remains to be determined. What really needs to happen is beyond the administration taking the lead, teachers need to go into the classrooms and they'll figure out what's best. They'll come up with a solution. And as we said, repurposing space, especially if students aren't going to be doing contact sports in gym, that might be the opportunity to look at repurposing space there. And you take a gym, I think of some of our elementary schools, and certainly the elementary school I went to, where you had classrooms off the gym. Does the gym now just become the classroom? Do you end up having maybe a larger classroom and do some team teaching? That's certainly a possibility. One-on-one special ed services are going to be challenging, but we've got to somehow get back to the norm. 3 feet is a lot more easy to deal with than 6 feet, but it's going to be challenging, and school's going to look a little different. They could look at sort of an on-off A-B type schedule, or kids in the classroom for the morning versus the evening. If I had to just call it from sort of an administrative standpoint, not an education standpoint, I think that's going to be disruptive. I don't know how parents plan around the school day knowing that kids have been going to school for a whole day and now they're going to school for a half day. I just don't know if that would work on a societal level. So I think the solution lies in relooking at our buildings and just trying to imagine things. I mean, it could be something as simple as you have built-in cubby space in a room that you need to remove, and maybe we need to look at changing how we handle supplies. Maybe going more digital will be more helpful. I don't know. I know that some of the teachers we have here on the chat and some of the teachers we have in the Norwood schools are going to be the ones who can find a good solution to figure out how we make it work. The other challenge being, of course, just about every building is a little bit different, and that's a challenge. Certainly as we go forward building a new middle school, I hope that the MSBA allows that to be part of the conversation, that you should have 1,000 square foot classrooms and you should have classrooms that have enough room to be flexibly spaced. Yeah, Sarah said districts are required to play. Yeah, we mentioned that earlier. School districts, so the school department's required to plan for regular in-person learning, some sort of a hybrid, and full remote learning. And I think they'll plan for it. I think return to regular in-classroom instruction is probably going to happen. Doris had posted acrylic desk dividers. Well, that's always a possibility. I try to think back to myself in elementary school, and if you put a big plastic shield around me, would I be able to work with that? I don't know. And then if kids are knocking them down and then they're sneezing on them and then they get it cleaned, we don't know. I think finding a way to make the distancing work and repurposing how we do certain things is probably the best way to do it, but it will remain to be seen. And as Sarah said, we hope it does change construction for schools. Unfortunately, the MSBA controls a lot of the purse strings without paying for more than half the cost of a school. But I think if we're going to say that until we have a vaccine, but even planning for the future, we want to make sure we can maintain a certain number of space. Now, I don't know what colleges and universities are going to do, because I do know most of the state university system doesn't have large style lecture halls, but I do remember going to Bridgewater State and there were sometimes 37 or 38 kids in a class and you were jammed in there with a tiny desk. I don't know how that's going to work, but luckily the town of Norwood does not operate a state university or a community college, so that's one problem we don't have to deal with. But I'm sure education will look a little different in the fall and we'll have to get creative, but I'm confident we'll come up with some solutions. Best case scenario, our numbers continue to go down. Yeah, dividers bumping up against restrictions regarding seclusion. In a perfect world, you could see it working, but I just try to, and I know we shouldn't do this, I try to think back to myself in elementary school, and if I had my own little private divider, I don't know if I would pay attention less or more, unless you got a really cool digital one that, had your digital displays on it. That I don't know. And then the high school too, we'll have to consider. We were able to safely fit at 6 feet, I think 160 people in the gym. But then again, taking 100 high school freshmen and putting them in the gym, even though colleges do it, I don't know if that's really worth it. Question here: can Norwood start end of October or November first week? So that's always a possibility, and I don't want to put that. I will put that out there. That's always within the realm of possibility that schools won't open right on September 1st, and then we see where the numbers get us. We wouldn't necessarily make that decision. I suppose it could be made at the local level. We would want to follow the guidance from the state as to whether or not schools open later. The problem is remote learning is particularly challenging for younger students, and you lose something in doing full-on remote learning. So if you did it for another month, would it be the worst thing in the world? Not necessarily, but you would have to see that month would perhaps let the numbers get to a point where things would be a little bit better for the educational component. So you could always start. I think if we were at a point where we knew that one more month would make a big difference, I think you could look at doing that. Or, you started 2 months later, and would that make a big difference? And you just change around the way it is. That's certainly a possibility, but that's certainly a challenge. And as Sarah said, adapting the school calendar is being discussed. I do know that colleges are having students probably stay. I think they're coming home on November break. And if you think of all the kids that travel out to school and come back to school, that might, looking at a different school calendar might be helpful. Question here, a comment here, somebody says their little one is going to first grade and gets distracted by a streak on the car window. I can't imagine clear partisans working in a classroom properly. I get distracted by streaks on a window. I can tell you as a student, I'd probably be trying to tape stuff up there and block myself off from the teacher. So they may work in certain circumstances. Where you may see those dividers working is students in a very small classroom setting, or where there's some special needs, or some one-on-one services. There may be a place for them somewhere, but maybe not everywhere. Mid more in July, and all likely guidance will be 90% prescriptive. Sarah, you're right. The short answer is we kind of know how schools are going to look in the fall. The real answer is, where are our numbers in a month? I mean, we're reporting less than 10 cases a week here in Norwood. If numbers going into the fall, as we continue to open up, are less than 10 cases a week, then to be honest with you, there's next to no risk. And you can look at the guidelines and say maybe they can be edited, but that's based on the numbers today and the last 5 days. We don't know where they're going to go, and if numbers continue to spike in other parts of the country, that could impact our numbers. So I think we have an idea of where we're going, but we don't exactly know for sure until our numbers are. If they continue at the pace they're at, and if the decline continues at the pace that we're at, I think you'll have a level of comfort that will be different, and maybe you will see that 3 feet guidance becomes maybe 2 feet or 2.5 feet, or you're able to make some exceptions where you're reasonably following safe guidelines and masking and other items. So shortly, it remains to be seen. And again, maybe plastic working desks will be an option. We are looking at town hall, and it's on my list to address. One of the challenges with town hall is we have a lot of smaller offices here. So once we do open back up, we're looking at creating some alternate workspace. So we're going to take 1 or 2 of the meeting rooms downstairs and put 2 or 3 workstations in there, so we can maintain, for staff who are concerned, a certain number of distance for people working, several hours at a time, to be able to have that distance. So that's just a repurposing of the space, and the meeting goes online. The schools can certainly look at that as well. So that's what we're talking about getting a little creative and seeing where it is. There's no amount of money that you could spend to reconstruct school buildings to make it work more perfectly, but that could be a solution as well. And Kevin, you're absolutely right. It's a waiting game. Scientifically, it absolutely is a waiting game. If we could make decisions today based on our numbers, we had 2 cases this week in Norwood. Our numbers are great and everything's fine, but we need to see where that holds out. We need to see where the rest of the state is, where the rest of the country is, and whether or not Moderna's phase 3 trials. And I know there's a number of other biotechs out there that are in different phases. We, of course, keep a little bit closer eye on Moderna because they're here in Norwood, and we would certainly like to be able to say that Norwood was found the cure for the coronavirus, but we need to see where those are by August, by September. Question from Fainza. I'd like to know if the town is all open for paying bills. The town hall is still not open yet for a couple of reasons. One is amending our workstations to be able to take a full flow of people is difficult because it's an old building that's historic, so it's a little bit more difficult for us to just cut out walls and put up barriers and make some changes there. The elevator's also down at Town Hall right now. We'll be down through August. Currently, the air conditioning is also down, one of the challenges of a 90-year-old building. We can take any payments, and there's a couple of ways you can do them. We have a payment bin in the parking lot behind Town Hall. It's secured physically and it's monitored remotely so that there's a camera on it. That's the number one place you can drop a bill. You can always mail bills into us too at 566 Washington Street. And for folks who are underbanked or unbanked and pay cash for their bills, the Bank of Canton main branch in Canton and the Norwood Bank here on Central Street, if you go in there with cash, they will cut you a check to your Norwood MA, to your Town of Norwood bill. So there are still options out there for everyone to pay bills. It'll be a little bit while longer before we can physically open Town Hall up again. We have to rearrange workstations. We have to get through some of the work in the building to make sure that the building is accessible. But all of our town services, and starting after the 4th, the one service we weren't able to do that we're able to do now will be marriage licenses and marriage intentions. You can have You can access all of those services. You can call Town Hall, whether we make an appointment. For payments, you can mail them in, you can drop them in the bin, and if you don't have a check, you can go to Norwood Bank or Bank of Canton, main branch in Canton. They will take your cash and issue a check to the town for you. So you can always pay your bills and you can get every option there. And as Layla said there, we have the payment box outside. It's a secure metal box. It's under lock and key, and it is monitored remotely. Yes, free of charge for the check. So Bank of Canton, their main branch in Canton, and the Norwood Bank, they do not charge you, and you do not need to have an account. So if you have a $100 gas bill, we don't take gas bills here, but if you have a $100 electric bill and you always pay in cash, you can go there. They will have a check made out to the town for you. You give them the cash, they give you the check. There's no charge. There's a small printing charge that the town absorbs the cost for, but we're grateful to Norwood Bank for their help with that. So that's the best way to do it. And again, you can always mail them into 566 Washington Street, and you can also drop them in the box. It's a big blue box in the lot behind Town Hall. And you can also go online and pay any of your bills online as well. We'll get that link put into the comments, so that's always an option as well for paying your bills online. Pools, the Board of Health conducted their walkthrough of Haas Pool today. Haas Pool will be opening. We've gotten a couple questions about how come Father Max won't be opening this summer. We're going to prepare Father Max, but the Board of Health has serious reservations about having two pools running. The one being a lot of towns aren't opening any of their pools. Pools can be quite the incubator for transmitting communicable diseases. I spent a lot of time in pools as a kid, and maybe somebody told me that I wouldn't have spent as much time in a pool as a kid. There's a misconception out there that just because there's chlorine in the water, it kills everything. That's not necessarily the case. It's warm water. There's bodily fluids going everywhere. Yes, chlorine kills some stuff, but it takes all the oil and the sweat off your body. And, we all grew up going to pools. There's always the person who pees in the pool. And, there's always the urban rumor about you have the stuff that makes it turn green. So pools are fun, but pools are incubators of communicable disease. When you look at the restrictions we have to have for additional maintenance and additional monitoring, as well as the lifeguards, that cuts the capacity of the pool down quite a bit. So the Board of Health was comfortable with Haas opening up for now. Later in the summer, that may change. We're going to make sure we run some water through Father Max so it's available. We may be able to use it as an alternate if Haas had to shut down for a day. But the other challenge being the bathrooms being very small at Father Max. And when you look at the capacity restrictions, given the size there, it cuts it down to not only an uneconomical, but the number of residents to be there wouldn't work there. Karen, the town does accept resident checks. Bank of Canton and Norwood Bank were only if you pay for cash and you don't have cash. So if you want to write a check out of your checking account, you're more than able to do that. That is just for people who maybe don't have access to a checking account. There are a lot of people out there who pay in cash and who are unbanked or underbanked. So you can write a check, or you can go online and pay your bills online through Unibank, which is right there. Joe just posted the link there. Can we discuss town meeting and feedback for the fall? Sure, Sarah. I would appreciate hearing any feedback you have. We had about 166 town meeting members attend town meeting. All articles passed. We think it went really well. The gym may be on for a permanent solution. I can tell you that there was some concern about folks attending town meeting, but at 166 people, that's about average for a town meeting, just as the election was about average. We were able to trim the budget warrant way down, so it was less votes. It was about 88 different votes 2 years ago, and then it got cut down to about 55, and now it's more in tune with the rest of the Commonwealth, where it's about 12 votes. Really, most towns do it in less than 5, but we'll settle with the 12 votes. So we think that moved well. It helped things move along. I think recording the presentation from the FinCom and the school committee ahead of time was helpful. I think we'll look through that again. It was so Sarah, we didn't get any. I haven't got any complaints that it was hard to hear. I was towards the front of the room. We can always work on the sound, depending on where you're sitting. If you did have a sound issue, we can always add more speakers. The lack of visuals, we can look at doing a temporary screen. The other thing we could do, we provided all of the information to town meeting members. The other thing we could do is have a slide deck that's either handed out in person or we put up on the wall. The outside seating was nice. Apparently folks had fun outside seating at town meeting. I was, of course, inside. We probably won't be able to do that in the fall. I think the organization of the warrant and the budget book was good. Thank you, Courtney, for that comment. We're looking to get more information out there. We keep conforming our budget to the Government Finance Officers Association best budget practices or best practices for transparency and budgeting. So each year we move a little bit more towards that. So we'll continue to do that. And we reduced some redundancies in the budget where I think 2 years ago, as part of the result of our changing our accounting system, we had the budget listed like 4 different ways. It was sort of by big account group, then by medium account group, then by small account group, then by line item. The organization of the budget book made it difficult to follow. So we could, Sarah, we could put something specific in the budget book that was following along, but we included all the motions, and that's actually something we usually haven't done. So if you follow the motions, that would have been a little bit easier. As for a key telling you what page to look at, we can look at that in the future, or we can have the moderator announce, okay, now we're on Article 4, it's page such and such on your book. Remember that the actual line item budget is over 400 pages. So the votes come down to a shorter amount. So we can look at that. In terms of advanced noticing of the different presentations that we do, we're usually a little bit more ahead of the game. This year was a unique year in a lot of ways. So we will try to get those done well ahead of time next year. This year, the Finance Commission really didn't even approve a final budget. They made some last changes until just a couple weeks before town meeting. So even though we had more time for town meeting, the budget in some ways was actually later than it normally was, and then it was getting all that information out to everyone. We would have liked to have been where we were about 2 weeks ahead of time, so we could have done the sessions and then not had them be so close to town meeting. But we get a challenge with the amount of time where if we do it too far ahead of time, folks tend to forget. But we'll look into the sound. And according to the result, we try to reduce how much information we have in there multiple times, which I think confuses people more. I don't think that's being transparent when you have 4 copies of the same budget in a book. You sort of have your major categories that you're going to vote on, and then you have your line item budget. Last year, we had 2 extra copies of the budget in there. Karen, so your question about disposal stickers, cash only, the reason is when folks post a check that ends up bouncing, the town ends up having to pay a charge for that. And what happened is starting a few years ago, that happened too much and it started to cost a lot of money. And what it does is it costs taxpayers money. We are looking at a system for online stickers where you can pay online as we can speed up some of the process. But it came to the point where sometimes 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 checks people were bouncing because some folks are just looking to get rid of something and they get the sticker. That's why it became a challenge for us where it was costing the town hundreds of dollars a year to accept checks for, a $30 bulk disposal sticker. I can talk to the treasurer about reversing that and looking back at it again, but it just cost us a lot of money. But as part of our Munis conversion, we're looking at a way to make some of these things a little bit more digital friendly, as well as an opportunity to swipe. We're looking even as simple as Square, and it's a little difficult to do that for larger payments because we take a loss, but on something like a bulk sticker, we can just raise the price $1 or $2 and have people be able to swipe. We're hoping when we get to Town Hall being open, we'll have a few more of those options as well. As for the consent agenda, Sarah, jumping back to town meeting, I'd agree it was a little, and Sarah, you'd sent me a message about that. I'm sorry for not responding to you on that one. This year was just very different and very challenging. I think the Rules Committee did a good job in coming up with the consent agenda. I think we can probably look at doing that. I believe there was a question on the Health and Human Services budget and about 45 minutes discussion on a part-time position going to full-time in the general government budget, and then $118 million of spending between light, public works, public safety, and the school department passed with no discussion. So the consent agenda would probably facilitate that process as well. I'm a big fan of a consent agenda. We did use a consent agenda in the last community I worked in, and we did it for everything, and it worked fine. Question from Leila, are we going to be celebrating 4th of July parade? There will not be a parade this year. Events of that nature are still not allowed under the governor's under the governor's orders. NCM is going to be doing some special programming for the 4th of July. The other challenge is the fundraising for the 4th of July, as well as a lot of the bands that come in from out of state are either not traveling or not able to quarantine for a few weeks. So we're trying to do something special for Norwood Day. 4th of July will likely just be some programming from NCM, and I'm sure it will be great. Last year's pacing was much easier. You're absolutely right, Sarah. Last year's pacing was much better. The goal would be to have sort of 4 nights of budget Q&A, 2 to 3 nights on the town budget and a night for the school budgets, and then give a week or two for sort of reflection and people to get their questions answered, and then maybe you do the presentations a week before town meeting. We're going to look to do more. Our goal is to do more every year. We didn't do municipal finance 101 this year. I think because we always look to do that, or we've done it the last couple of years, and we do have a lot of new town meeting members. That might be better to do in the winter, so that way we're not also trying to do that with town meeting. So, and we'd like to go back next year to what we did last year, which is sort of a more formal presentation from department heads where they talk a little bit about what the money goes to, not just explaining the money. And that gives you a chance to sort of ask some of those programmatic questions. There's always that tension at town meeting. People have questions, but sometimes people just have curiosity questions where it's, hey, I'm curious how the DPW goes about selecting a vendor or choosing where they send compost or something like that. And those are good questions. They're not always the best questions for town meeting because some people feel like they're being held up and you've got a lot of agenda and you've got work to do. But we want to go back to that more interactive budget format where you can ask those questions about the operations and dive a little bit more into it and have that back and forth with department heads or the town manager or the school superintendent on the budgets ahead of time. And then town meeting is really for the debate, or I hear from a lot of town meeting members, they one of the positives I heard this year about town meeting was they felt like they knew what their job was and they were going there to do their job instead of also trying to learn about it at town meeting. So we will make sure that next year the pacing is a little bit better. How that'll probably happen is scheduling those sessions ahead of time and building that calendar out. One of the other things we'd like to look at doing with town meeting with the budget is trying to have a town meeting schedule so that way it's not all, hey, it's annual town meeting in the spring and let's do everything that we do in the spring for annual town meeting. Now, we usually have a special in the fall and we'll continue to do that. This year we'll be doing capital. We may want to do capital in the fall every year because it's a little bit better pacing for these capital projects. And if it's a better pacing for a capital project, it might be better to just take that up there. So that way the annual is not such a slog. I think that distracts some people from wanting to go to town meeting. And I don't think you make as good a decision when you're there on night 6 and it's like, oh, and now this budget is coming up and you're either running through it or somebody really wanted to talk about it and the rest of the town meeting is sort of like, no, we've been here for 5 nights, we're not interested. So trying to look at our calendar for town meeting and pacing some of the things out better might be a better idea than rushing everything in with just the annual. Yeah, and the school Q&A, I mean, it was tough. Question, I'd like to open a Norwood restaurant. Do I think it's a good time? I guess that's challenging. Right now is, I mean, I always encourage folks to open businesses in Norwood. I think it's a great community. We have a lot of restaurants. They play well off each other. We're looking to draw people in from other communities to the restaurants. We actually want to do some online marketing for weekends on Central and Norwood Center with all the outdoor dining and the rest of the community to draw people in from other communities that may not be as robust as Norwood to help the business. You know, is it a good time with COVID? Until you can get back up to that seating capacity, it might be challenging. But once you're there to once we're beyond that seating capacity a little bit, maybe once we're into phase 3 and entertainment opens up, that might be the better time to do it. But you start looking into it now because it's always a good, it's always a challenge. And Norwood's known as a very business-friendly community, but we always like to support restaurants and businesses coming into town. Yep, from the rec department, shout out to the schools and Paul Riccardi and Dr. Thompson for being able to pull off a fun summer with rain locations. And shout out to the Board of Health and their staff. Yes, we're happy that camps are going to be open this summer. My understanding is the registration for camps was pretty well filled or was pretty heavy, so there's a desire for that. Again, there's some communities that are doing no pools, no camps, and no nothing. We think there's a safe way to do everything we need to do, and we're looking forward to the future where some of these restrictions are going to be permanent. We're going to have to just figure out how to operate differently, and we'd rather do that now and figure out how to operate safely and make sure that we are able to do that going forward. And we just posted there the information about emailing CPED, and we'd be more than happy to try to help you get look into opening a restaurant or any other business in town. We always welcome businesses coming into town. I do want to address a question we got, and I'll reply to this person individually about density, and their question was in the context of changing the town's zoning to reduce density because density has been shown to have an impact on COVID-19 numbers or the spread of any infectious disease. So there's some truth to that. However, it's really demographics combined with the density, not the density. And the example of that is both Brookline and Cambridge, both much larger than Norwood, much, much more denser. Norwood has 30,000 people in 10 square miles. Cambridge has 120,000 people in 7 square miles, and Brookline is 60 some odd thousand people in a smaller area. The density does have an impact, but it's the density combined with the demographics. We have a lot of individuals who are essential workers, who are lower income, we have a larger immigrant population. So one of the tragedies of COVID is that it does tend to trend towards not necessarily certain ethnic groups, but towards people who are essential workers who have to go into work. So a lot of the folks who are PCAs and the nursing assistants, everything, they're going out to work. Though a lot of the folks who are essential workers, not necessarily nurses and doctors and others, have lower wage jobs, and they tend to live in denser communities that are lower income communities. So it's the density plus the demographics, because Brookline, great numbers. Cambridge, 117,000 people in 7 square miles, great numbers. Chelsea, Brockton, terrible numbers. It's the density with the demographics. If you looked at the numbers from, we looked at the numbers for the 5 large apartment complexes in Norwood, and they're less than 10% of our cases, despite that being like 2,000 units. So it's not the density, it's the demographics combined with the density. So you could completely change the density and you wouldn't see a difference. So there's really there's not much science to that. And the idea that you can change zoning doesn't change the fact that you're already built out. What you see in some of the larger, older 2 and 3 units is multiple families living together with people who are essential workers who had to continue working. And that's where you saw the spread going in. It wasn't in the apartment complexes. It was where you had a lot of families living together in one unit, and that's usually at some of your older rental stock, which is why you see that in Brockton, you see it in Chelsea, you see it in Lowell. You did not see it in similar housing stock in Cambridge and in Brookline, because unfortunately they tend to be wealthier communities where folks either didn't have to work or were able to completely work at home. So that's one of the unspoken tragedies of COVID, is who it impacted both economically and from an epidemiological standpoint. Great question here from Sarah. What's the next step with Forbes Property? It looks like a developer had highest bid. Yes, so the town used under state statute what's known as the IFB process, where we effectively sell the property to the highest bidder. They still have to go through the process of selling, of developing the property according with existing zoning and the overlay district. So it was sold to a company, Continental Properties, out of, I believe it's either New York or Connecticut. They're looking at I think some apartments and a medical office building, maybe a hotel, but we sold it for $13.5 million, and we expect to close within 90 days. That's what the requirement is, and we believe that they're able to do that, and that won't be a problem. We're in touch with them on a regular basis. We're just sort of crossing the I's and dotting the T's. If you've ever bought a house and you know how much paperwork you have to fill out for a company to buy a $13 million 27-acre parcel from a entity of local government, there's even more paperwork, but we're moving aggressively to make sure we can close on the sale and move forward with the history of that property in town, and we look forward to a good developer there. So far, the developer that purchased it has been good to work with. They're a legitimate entity, and we look forward to working with them, and hopefully once we can get that off our books, it'll allow us to look at perhaps some other open space acquisitions that will be a little bit more useful for the community, a little bit better bang for the buck. Is Norwood going to start up the pink bag for recycling textiles? We should look into that. It was really on that company. I bet folks have been shopping on Amazon, have a lot of stuff at home, but we'll look into that and get an answer on you on that one. That's a good question. Hope everything will be good to celebrate Norwood Day and having renewed life in Norwood, because now it looks like Europe, all restaurants have seating outside. We call it cafe or trattorias. I agree, Layla. I think Norwood looks fantastic. I think it looks at night. I've been going for picnics. I've been eating outdoors. I think it looks beautiful. I appreciate all the residents for coming and supporting the businesses. Occasionally, I've heard from a business here or there that one day here, one day there, restaurant downtown, they're doing the same gross that they did that day the year before, and that's important. There are some towns that are still calling us, asking us how we got our outdoor dining set up, and can they look at our regulations. They've already lost precious weeks. So some restaurants have closed completely, unfortunately. Some saw a 40, 50, or 60% drop in business. And if they're getting closer to normal in June, then we can hope that they'll be closer to normal for July and for August. And then the goal is next year to do this every summer so that our businesses in Norwood can draw people in from other communities. Think of us like a summer community where Memorial Day hits and bam, we do weekends on Central and we throw out all the outdoor dining and everyone's doing it at once. We want to create a little bit of that scarcity so that way we're looking for it and we're sort of hungry for it and the restaurants can play off of each other. But you do that and then Norwood becomes that summer destination where, hey, it's a weeknight and the family's not down the Cape, you're in Westwood, you're in Walpole, you're in Sharon. Where do you want to go? Let's go to Norwood Center or any of the other great restaurants in Norwood and have a good time. And it brings people into town from out of town and helps the businesses and helps our businesses make money and they employ people. It's a good thing. I think it also just works on a community level where it's just beautiful. It's nice to be out there enjoying weekends on Central, enjoying the Norwood Center, seeing people walk around. I know most nights, especially on the weekend, I'm just making rounds, walking around downtown. You see people, at the restaurants and it's just nice to be out. I think it would have been nice anyway, but especially us having been confined and stuck in our homes for so long, it's one of those elements that I think people were really asking for or people really wanted it. And it's been great. Question from Kevin here. Are we going to be getting more grass picnic tables at the new space? Not too many due to social distancing. At Haas. What we're looking at is we're facing a challenge with the supply chain as everyone else is. And we ordered cafe-style tables for weekends on Central, and they've been back-ordered, and we don't know when they're going to come in. The tables that we had were built by the DPW and the facilities department. A little competition between who did better. DPW sort of stained theirs, but facilities rounded the edges. So I rated them both equally. They both did exceptional. But we're ordering more tables through the sheriff's office, and we're going to look at building more because we want those cafe tables when they're out to go and increase the seating capacity in keeping it with a socially distanced, but so that more people can be at Central Street. We're also looking at placing pools out at DAV Park. We're not placing an additional pool anywhere. Picnic tables on Chapel Street and as well as at Hawes, the whole area, behind Hawes Pool. I think there's a half a picnic bench there, and it looks like it was sort of dismantled. We want to put several there so we can create several other areas in town where you can go and have a picnic and have your takeout and just eat outdoors through July and August. So we're looking to add quite a bit of tables there and around other places in town. Sanjeev, still having a problem with Plantation Circle and Pilgrim Drive. I spoke to the police chief directly last week after that, and he said he would send additional patrols. We will make sure that they continue taking a look at it, and I'll get some information on when they've been doing it, but we'll make sure to continue to have them address that with those two circles. Kids sometimes probably getting bored and running around and ringing doorbells. We'll continue to keep the stepped up police presence there. I'll talk to the chief again today. Couple other questions I have here for folks. So I did get a question from somebody about they had gone through our community testing program and the hospital's not necessarily calling everyone when they test negative. We're going to work on the hospital with that. It's a challenge with the test reporting and the number of tests that get done and calling folks to let them know they're negative. We were supposed to be getting the hospital's test results so we can make the calls, but the state doesn't actually give us the negative calls either, which we find to be a little challenging, but I understand it from their perspective that we get positives, we don't necessarily get negatives. So they could come in and say, well, we tested 50 people here, and we say, what are the results? And it's, well, you'll hear them if they're positive. So we're going to work on that and see if we can make sure we can get that information out. We had let the hospital know that we wanted to take the lead in our community testing program, so we could let people know, but we'll be reaching out and looking into that as well. Larry, yeah, at least September. So with the outdoor dining, it's we'll be guided by talking to the restaurants too and seeing what they want to do. You want to be able to create some scarcity over the course of the year. You want it to be successful because then it becomes an event. Whether it runs through September, we may have a different time period for the licensed versus the unlicensed establishments, but we've been talking about every other week with most of the restaurants in town, and we're going to continue doing that and talking about what works for them. I'm sure some of them would like to make sure that there's some consistency among their peers, that there's a benefit when sort of everyone is doing it. If you let it go on too long and a few stop doing it, a few other ones stop doing it, you can't market people to come and just try any place, and that becomes a challenge. But we haven't set a specific date in mind. We just want to be flexible. We'll work with the restaurants and make sure that it works for them and it works for us as well. I had a note here and I can't read what my handwriting says. Feed Norwood, the Mustang Food Pantry. Check out the Feed Norwood Facebook page if you haven't. The Mustang Food Pantry is doing a drop off tomorrow, so if you're able to donate, please go ahead and donate tomorrow. They will be up at the high school. We'll be meeting in the next week or so to determine whether or not we're going to continue some or all of our different food programs over the summer. The schools will be continuing to do the weekly the school lunch program and the breakfast program Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. They were able to get the waiver for that, so that will continue. Sarah, we are all impressed with how the town and the restaurant owners have worked. How many restaurants in South Norwood are doing it? The Cafe Venice is doing it. They've got an awesome little setup. It's a little tough because it's behind their building, so you can't necessarily see it, but they've got a great setup on there. So they're doing it, and I believe Mina's Cafe is doing it, and certainly the Brookside is doing it as well. Brookside has they placed some tarps. It looks like a really cool shade structure. They've got some indoor seating, and I love their outdoor seating. They're Brookside because they're next to the brook, but now they're really Brookside for the dining. Full disclosure, I sometimes go there 2 or 3 times a week. It's they seem to be doing well with it. But check out any of the places in South Norwood. They're all great restaurants. We don't have any more sit-down establishments. There's some smaller places. There's the Butcher. There's the Little Bakery, and there's Cafe Fresh Bagel. I don't believe they're doing any outdoor seating other than maybe a handful of seats out there. Picnic tables at the Balch would be nice now that baseball is starting. That's not a bad idea. That could something we could look at it. Comparatively, with how cheap picnic tables are, that would be something good worth looking into. The Norwood Fund. Oh, I haven't gotten an update on this week. I will get an update. I know that we did recently work through some of the veterans portion of the funding as we provided some supplementary assistance to the veterans on our 115 program. I will get an update on that. That's actually a good idea for me to check into. You can still donate to the Norwood Fund. There is still a need. We know that the economy is opening back up. Our region, so our workforce region, has a lower than state average. Our region has the lowest average in the state for unemployment, but in Norwood it's still hovering around 16.2. So there are a lot of folks who haven't necessarily gotten jobs yet. And again, there's a lot of different programs out there. Some people are getting the extra unemployment, but we're still having people who are suffering. We're still having people who are calling us without any real assistance. And there's people who are directly impacted by COVID, but then there's folks who are always sort of on the margin to begin with, and it's really impacting them. So 100% of what goes into the Norwood Fund goes into, it's primarily food aid, but sometimes it's a little bit of utility assistance for seniors, veterans, families, and just people in need. And we do the intake through the Citizen Information Center, 781-352-2363. The Citizen Information Center is still up and running. We're still actually seeing about 70 or 80 calls a week to it. We encourage you to call it. We're going to keep that going for a variety of reasons. One, it becomes a great citizen information center, or resident information center, I should call it. They have translation services available, and it's a great scale capacity for us. If we do have any other pandemics or emergencies, we can scale that up and scale that down if we have any big programs. So we encourage everyone to do that. Question from Cullen. I'm not sure exactly which email from Dr. Thompson. If you want to forward it to me, I can get you an answer to that. I know that the school department is facing some challenges. They've got a lot going on as they try to get into how they do all this learning. I mean, they know how to teach, but it's trying to do it in a different way. Our library was one of the first around to have pick up. Oh, incidentally, the library is going to probably open first week of August. Fingers crossed, not air quotes. But Colin, if you want to send that email to me, we can have a conversation about that, and I can get back to you on that. The library, which was one of the first to do the book drop off, pick up and drop off program. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. And they've continued to expand it. And we think it's doing it's a great job, and we're looking at possibly August 1st for the library to open. The Civic will open within a couple weeks of Phase 3 starting. Phase 3 may start as early as June 7th. I can tell you if it's June 7th or 8th that Phase 3 starts, the Civic will be a couple more weeks, but it may be early August. It's just going to take us time to make sure we're doing things correctly, and it's particularly challenging for us with the Civic because this is the busiest time of year, not for the building, but for camps and pools and everything else that's going on. Well, now, Sarah, I appreciate that I made your day letting you know that the library will be opening soon. The library staff are anxious to get open. We just want to do it safe. And as for you can't afford many more Kindle books, well, we know the Kindle books are actually getting pricey. I remember when the idea was that the Kindle books used to be a lot cheaper. The library has this great system called Hoopla that lets you lets you download books onto your Kindle, your other device. And if you have maxed out how many books they let you do, we can increase that and increase that service. So they do have the digital lending as well. I ordered a book yesterday and I don't know where it went. I think I already brought it home. But yes, we are looking to get the library open. If we all continue doing what we're doing, be good about the social distancing, and I know it's never going to be 100% compliance, but wear your masks, be good, stay home when you're sick. Our numbers will continue to trend and we can get back to doing the things that we love. And I keep telling everyone, Sarah, they will never get sick of you picking up curbside. They love when people come and pick up curbside. That's what they're there to do. They're librarians. They love reading and getting other people to read it. We will look at seeing if we can address the maxing out issue with the Hoopla service there. And I agree. I enjoy browsing as well. I haven't gotten into Barnes and Noble lately. Sarah couldn't finish all of Hoopla. Yeah, that's actually the problem, Sarah. Is the 27,000 books in there? You read them all, so we'll go find another couple thousand books for you. But the library loves helping you out and loves everyone helping them out as well. So continue to use the Hoopla service and continue to do the curbside pickup. You can do it every single day if you want, and get lots of books and return them and read. I always encourage everyone to read. I enjoy reading. I go on vacation specifically to read. But if we continue with the good social distancing, we'll be able to. Well, Sarah is quite the common name, so they were probably like, "Which Sarah?" And you should have just said, "Which Sarah do you think it is?" And they probably would have known that. But if we continue the social distancing, we'll be able to get back to where we are. And what I'm already thinking about is we get through this, we beat this, and we get on the other side of it. And then what's next summer going to look like? Well, Memorial Day is going to hit, and we're going to do weekends on Central, and we're going to get benches out at 10 different places in town, and all the restaurants are going to go do the outdoor dining, and everyone's going to have a good time, and we'll have more music, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. So think forward to where we're going to be. I think my daily briefing, I don't have my daily briefing here. We're on day 109 since the start of for us in Norwood, and it feels like 109 years, but we've met our pace, and we've fought the fight, and we've raced the race, and we're doing well, and so is the Commonwealth. We hope the rest of the country doesn't hold us by, but we're doing well. I don't think we ever would have thought Norwood Center would have looked this way. I don't think we would have ever thought that the OCC could have looked that way. So we're doing good and keep doing good and keep supporting local businesses that are out there. I think this has led me to look at it a lot of different places differently. I was never a big outdoor dining person personally. I always liked the air conditioning, and now it's all I ever want to do. I just want to be outside and eat outside, have ice cream outside, and sit under the lights. And I think what it's led us to do, at least from a staff perspective in the town, and certainly a lot of residents, is we're starting to reimagine our public spaces. I was joking with somebody recently, if you watch a movie, that's all what everyone thinks a typical suburb looks like, is you watch this camera shot pan across a neighborhood in a movie, and you see all these people walking their dogs, and all these people walking and running and jogging and stopping and chatting each other. And it took a pandemic for us to start using our neighborhoods like that. I mean, for how many years, other than some concerts and a couple of events, the town common was really just scenery. It was beautiful, it was attractive, but it was just, oh, that's nice. We didn't actually use our town common as a place to gather. And now, some nights you go out there and there's 8, 9, 10 little kids playing on the gazebo and tumbling on the grass and tumbling on the turf and everything. And I think it's had us really reimagine our public spaces. And I think that's what we're going to do with schools. And I think despite the tragedy, and despite the fact that we're not done with it yet, and despite the death and everything else that's gone on, and despite the misery of these 109 days, we're going to get through this, and we're going to do things better than we did them before, and we're going to realize that we're going to take as much out of it. I mean, they say you take advantage of every crisis, and I think we've done that. I think we've gotten more benefit than other communities have out of this, where it's not just going to be a dark page in history, it's going to be a dark story with ultimately a happy ending. Drive-in movies in town, we've kicked around the idea of trying to do that. I have a call, I need to schedule a call with somebody who does the outdoor inflatable screens, and the rec does it. What we're thinking about is a series of smaller movies outdoors in different places, so we're not getting too many people in one place. The drive-in concept is really cool. It becomes a little challenging to find a parking lot big enough and an area that we could do it, but I know that Norwood United is considering a sort of a series of movies, 4 or 5 of them, on civil rights issues, and then you'd watch sort of a movie and then have a discussion on it. We're thinking of trying to maybe do some movies on Central Street on Friday and Saturday night, where it would really just be maybe background for while you're there. And we're going to look at some of the other parks as well. So that way there's just so much more to do. And for the cost of setting up some of these events, they're not that expensive for compared to what we spend on certain other things, that if it costs us a couple $1,000s to do 10, 12, 15 movies in town over the summer and show some classics and give families a chance in different parts of town to just have some entertainment, we want to do it, and we think we will. So more to come on that as we get on the other side of the 4th of July, that we want to do not just the rec department's always done different movie nights, but different ways to do them and different ways to just set up an inflatable screen and watch a classic. I'd love to watch Jaws at Hawes Pool, but I don't know if I'd win any votes on that one. But the idea is just get out there and get people using the community and using our outdoor spaces and getting people coming together in a safe manner, which I think is important. And I think that's important for the economy too, because I might be more apt to want to go and sit on the lawn at the high school and watch a movie and then go indoors to a movie theater. And it just becomes more about, why haven't we been doing this all summer long? We usually struggle and put one little program out here or there, but make summertime in Norwood like a vacation destination, like the towns down the Cape and like the towns on the Maine coast, where it's summer in Norwood and there's a ton to do, and it's always busy and there's always something going on. I think this has taught us we can do that, and people want to do that when you get that sort of that capacity, when you hit that tipping point. One other question I want to address, and then I have answered the questions that I have gotten. Somebody asked if we could do an Instagram live. Haven't done that yet, but we'd be willing to give it a shot. I know Facebook is fairly easy for folks to get to, and you can do a Facebook Live if you're not, if you don't have a Facebook account. We'd be certainly willing to try one on Instagram, but you can let us know in the comments, or you can send us a message if you think you would watch that. I haven't done an Instagram Live. I haven't watched as many of them, but we would certainly be willing to look at that as well. That being said, I believe that's all the questions I have gotten. Do I have any more here? A couple of citizen calls. Nope. Other questions for folks related to COVID or to any other town business or anything that the town's doing, we'll certainly take those. I'll open it up. We're always open to questions. We are looking forward to starting to get things back into work, things opening up. And again, the outdoor dining anywhere in town. We got a couple more applications in today for a few places. I believe the Chateau is getting up and running with outdoor dining, so there would be the next one that's being added. But if you feel safe, get out there and enjoy it. Enjoy Norwood Center in particular, and then the restaurants in South Norwood, and keep on keeping on. We've hit about an hour and 7 minutes. Are there other questions in the chat? Are there any questions that I missed? I've got some homework. I've got to look into the pink bags. I've got to talk to the police chief, and I have to look into tables at the Bulge. Man, these are turning into work sessions. And I need to look into the Hoopla service and some sort of a Sarah Quinn exception there for somebody who's read all the books on Hoopla. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Chris, for all your support and all your positive comments. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Yeah, David, there are questions about not loitering. That's mainly from a destructive point of view that we can probably look at looking at those signs. You can always enjoy the common. They didn't necessarily want people doing things that would damage the common, and it's always the the exception, not the rule, for people who do it. But we encourage people to always use the common, and you can use it for a lot of activities. Biking is not the safest thing on the common. I suppose if you're a 5-year-old on a little bike, nobody's going to have a problem with that. We just don't want to damage things, but we want people to use the common, be out there all day and every day, have a picnic, take a nap, get some great takeout, bring food from home. What type of Sunday this week? Not sure, to be determined. It's not Sunday Fun Day yet. Sunday Fun Day decisions are made on Sunday Fun Day. If there are no other questions, I hope everyone has a wonderful week. We will do this again next week as well. Thank you, everyone, and I will get back to some of you specifically with some of the questions that you have, and we'll get working on these. You can always ask questions in the comment or email us at managers@norwoodma.gov, managers@norwoodma.gov. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful week, and have a good holiday if anyone is going away, or just otherwise enjoy celebrating our independence and freedom, and let's keep ourselves free by practicing good social distancing and and wearing our masks. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week and a great weekend.